I recently reviewed the Robin Hood series I grew up with from the 2000s, I asked what adaptation of the legend I should look at next. And, to my surprise, the comments were filled with only one answer. Robin of Sherwood is a TV series produced by HTV and Goldcrest Films for ITV and broadcast across the world. Arguably the grittiest screen version of the legend at that point, it combined the legend with real historical events and pagan mythology, with Robin being chosen by the forest spirit Herne the Hunter to protect the people from authoritative tyrants. Although there are guest villains, these tyrants are primarily the Sheriff of Nottingham, his brother Abbot Hugo, a composite of multiple corrupt abbots and bishops from the legends, and the Sheriff's lackey, Guy of Gisborne. With his ensemble of fellow freedom fighters in Sherwood Forest, they fight against a variety of evils in Nottingham and elsewhere, from petty tyrants to satanic covens. And don't worry, this video is as spoiler-free as possible. The show was created and originally written by the late actor turned writer Richard Carpenter, then best known for writing children's fantasy series Catweasel, about an early medieval wizard who time travels to modern day. I've never seen this series, but it keeps coming up when I'm researching other things. Let me know in the comments if you think I should watch it. Anyway, from the sounds of it, he took a lot of the cast's suggestions into account, which really helped the development of the characters. It's clear that everyone cared deeply about them. In Series 3, which was longer than Series 1 and 2 with 13 episodes instead of 6 or 7, there was one episode written by Andrew McCulloch and John Flanagan, and half of the series was written by Anthony Horowitz in his first screenwriting role. This was around the time that the first Diamond Brothers book came out, but long before the Alex Rider series had given him household name status as a children's author. His episodes tended to offer a bit more in terms of fleshing characters out, particularly in the episode The Sheriff of Nottingham. This is actually the second time that I've reviewed his early scriptwriting work, as I've also reviewed Grim Tales with Rick Mayall. Michael Praed's Robin of Locksley is a calm and just leader. It's the first version of the character I've seen who isn't a nobleman of some kind. There are obviously multiple versions of this legend, with one where he's a nobleman's son and one where he's a yeoman, and this is the first version I've seen where he's the latter. Despite this Robin arguably being a messianic character, John Abinieri's ethereal Herne the Hunter is thankfully not too involved. Deus Ex Machina is probably my least favourite literary trope, as it often feels like a lazy, easy way out. However, Herne's involvement is often in the form of visions or cryptic messages. Judy Trotz does a fantastic job as Marion, who, in this version, is the ward of Abbot Hugo. Marion and Robin get together almost immediately, falling in love at first sight before marrying at the end of episode 2 and becoming a member of his band of outlaws, which isn't something I've seen a Robin Hood adaptation do before, so that was interesting. And she really is one of the lads. She's bold and vivacious and fights alongside the others, although if a plan involves some of them doing something other than combat, it's usually her and Tuck. I feel like later versions made more of a point of her fighting abilities, despite not joining the Merries. Although judging from Judy Trott's archery outtakes, I can't blame them. I liked how they delved into her anxieties at the end of Series 3. She is rescued with her friend, the Sheriff's chaplain, Friar Tuck, played by Phil Rose. The polar opposite of the Sheriff's corrupt brother, Tuck is a kind and just warrior, as well as the gang's spiritual voice of reason, who seemingly has no problem with their worship of Herne. You might assume that he's the comic relief, but he isn't any more so than the others, despite Rose's comedy skills and experience playing the role in Panto. Alongside Robin is his adopted brother Much, played by Peter Llewellyn-Williams. His father, the miller, raised Robin after his father was killed. He's young, loyal and naive. Then there's little John, played by Clive Mantle, a man who's possessed and sent to kill Robin by the villainous Baron de Belem in the first story. He's a big northern softie. He also has an on-and-off relationship with spirited local villager Meg, played by Claire Toman. Another of the Baron's former psychic slaves is the stoic Nazir, a former member of an order of assassins that he brought back from the Middle East. He's the best swordsman out of all of them, as well as a great tracker. He's one of those characters where the portrayal of him was intended to be positive, but there are still entrenched Orientalist stereotypes in the way that he and other Arab characters are portrayed. I mean, there's a scene where he and an old friend fight with katanas. I don't think I've ever seen a more ludicrous example of conflating Asian cultures than an Arab character using a Japanese sword. That, and, of course, Mark Ryan is, presumably, a white British man with a bit of fake tan on his face. However, his characterisation as a stoic loner is partially because he was never supposed to be in the show. He was just supposed to be a silent henchman in episode 2 and then get killed off by Robin. However, the crew just thought Nazir was really cool, so they decided to change the ending so that he joins Robin. Not only is he silent in series 3, but the characters have no lines about him. The rest of the series was presumably already written, so there are no lines even acknowledging the existence of Nazir, apart from the odd, "Your turn, Nazir," and "Nazir, come with me," which could easily be added on the day. The only exception is the last episode of the series, where Robin mentions him, and he and the king briefly talk to each other in Arabic.
No man belongs to another.
I can buy 4 Saracens in the slave markets of Nabon with my horse.
Well, here's a Saracen for you. Try buying him with 1,000 horses.
He does start talking in English from episode 2 of series 2 onwards, and his backstory is better fleshed out in series 3, more so than many of the other main characters. I did see someone say that he didn't seem as close to the others, and I would say that arguably only applies to series 1. He's definitely one of the lads from series 2 onwards. The fact that such a small role made such a big impression, and the fact that he's a favourite for many fans, is a real testament to Ryan's screen presence. Then there's Will Scarlet. Will Scarlet almost feels like he's from a different show. The other characters aren't bad, but his noticeably has more depth than the rest of the cast, especially as he's introduced with a dark backstory, having earned his name from killing the soldiers who assaulted and murdered his wife.
My name was Will Skeflock. It's Scarlet now.
There was clearly an effort in series 3 to flesh out the other characters, but never to the same extent as Will. He's almost always the source of internal conflict, agreeing with Robin in what they are doing, but disagreeing with the how and why at almost every turn, often arguing for more brutal treatment of their Norman oppressors such as Gisborne.
You should have killed him. You'll have to one day.
He is played by Ray Winston, who is the only main cast member who I know I've seen in other things. I know he's known for playing Cockney hard men in movies, but all I know him from is Quadrophenia, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Jonesy! Hi, Mac!
This was one of his first major roles, having played the lead in a couple of low-budget drama films at that point. As for their adversaries, Nicholas Grace, who looks like he would ace a 90s Tim Curry lookalike competition, plays the greedy and ambitious Sheriff of Nottingham. Although he is sadly not a goth, there's definitely some of the sardonic wit and unhinged temper that you can see in future iterations of the character, and you can tell that Grace really relishes the role. Robert Addy's resentful brute Guy of Gisborne lacks the sheriff's wit, but is the brawn to his brains, in charge of enforcing the law and carrying out his master's plans. Their conflict mirrors Robin and Will's, but, more importantly, Will and Robin have mutual respect for each other, and Guy and the sheriff do not, with Guy looking for opportunities to break away from his berating master in series 2 and 3. Although such a love rival for Marion like some other versions, he is someone who occasionally tries to use his position to strong-arm women into marrying him. There's also the tyrannical Prince John in a few episodes, played by Phil Davis, who I have seen in things before, but I didn't recognise him because he's so young here. He's delightfully evil in this, and it's a shame that he wasn't in the show more. As for returning supernatural villains, there's Richard O'Brien of Rocky Horror fame as an evil sorcerer in series 3, and he really milks it in the best possible way. He's very creepy. Most of the other supernatural villains are one-offs, and I sadly don't have the time to go into them here, as I know this is already going to be a long video, but they are brilliant. As for less frequent recurring characters, the most significant one is probably Edward of Wickham, played by the late original Boba Fett, Jeremy Bulloch. He's the wise and fair leader of a local village, and Robin's main ally outside of Sherwood, frequently standing up to the sheriff to protect his people. He'd actually written to the casting director asking to be considered for one of the Merrys before series 1, only to be told that he was too old, so this was the next best thing. His son was played by his actual son Robbie, who does a good job. And, of course, I can't forget the poor little prisoner and his pet rat Arthur.
Look, Arthur, It's raining.
Probably the most notable character who only appears once is King Richard, played by John Rhys Davies of Lord of the Rings and Indiana Jones fame. And they did do something different with the character. It's a shame that they didn't bring him back, but I imagine it was an availability issue. I know that there were a lot of big theatre and TV names at the time who guest starred, but being a zillennial, there are a few that I recognise apart from this guy who's in a couple of Bond films, and Fatumch. The guest stars were always good. As for the historical influence, there's a clear conflict in this series between the Normans and the Anglo-Saxons, with the former colonising the latter a couple of centuries earlier.
No, I'm English.
With a name like that?
Names tell you nothing.
They tell me who my masters are. What do you think we are? English or Norman?
Norman, my lord.
They have made this country what it is.
Ah, they've made it their money box.
That's right, John. They tax us to the hilt.
The show also takes place not during the Crusades, but during King Richard's fight to maintain his control over Normandy. The show tackles other medieval issues such as the anti-Semitism of the period, with the episode The Children of Israel, in which the sheriff spreads rumours of blood libel to avoid paying back moneylenders. The show does feature various historical events, such as King Richard being held for ransom, or King John raising an army to fight Llewellyn of Wales. It doesn't stand up to the scrutiny of dates, but if you're looking at the dates of historical events in a show where satanic witches try to steal a forest spirit's sword to bring back Lucifer, you're watching the wrong show. Speaking of which, although there were some previous attempts to incorporate fantasy into new versions of the legend, this is the first one to do so successfully. Robin Hood has always been a warrior against social injustice, so there is only so much room for a magical element in the show. In the first series, whilst there were references to Herne throughout and a mystical vibe, in no small part thanks to Ian Sharp's direction, only the first two-part story really delved into it with a magical villain. They did double down on these elements in later series though. To be honest, I do find it a bit funny that there's one episode where a village is convinced that they're being terrorised by demons, and even though he's never seen them, Robin is like, "No, these are clearly not demons. This is just foolish superstition. Take it from me, the son of a forest spirit." It plays well into the themes of culture and community in the face of a cold and tyrannical leader, particularly in the episode Lord of the Trees, where Gisborne and a bunch of Norman mercenaries try to destroy the local Herne festival and receive divine punishment for their dismissal of the indigenous culture that they're trying to erase. It's no coincidence that this show came out in the 80s. Foz Allen, the writer of the Robin Hood series I grew up with, said that Robin Hood, quote, was devoutly and dedicatedly spiritual in the middle of Thatcherism, which was overtly profoundly materialistic, end quote. Although I'll admit that I only know about Thatcherism through the lens of the media from that era, the Sheriff and Gisborne fit that mould of ruthless materialistic ambition whilst refusing to help the people in their care. Meanwhile, the Sherwood gang and the people of Wickham repeatedly coming together to support each other feels like it's in direct conflict with Thatcher's assertion that there was no such thing as society. Whilst the series was certainly popular when it was released, it still has its fair share of contemporary critics. Robin Hood is much like James Bond. Each time a new adaptation takes a grittier or darker direction, everyone complains that they've made the fun thing for kids depressing. I mean, Robin Hood Prince of Thieves got called that when it came out, and now its critics call it corny. How can a film where Mike McShane, from Whose Line Is It Anyway, addresses the camera at the end, be depressing? What are you on, mate? Anyway, it also came under fire for its violence, as it was shown in an early evening slot and marketed for families, particularly from Mary Whitehouse and the National Viewers and Listeners Association. For those of you who don't know, Whitehouse was a famous conservative activist who campaigned against television that she thought was inappropriate for children, such as Doctor Who, calling the 1975 serial Genesis of the Daleks tea time brutality for tots. Look, she may have been a homophobic bitch, but I have to appreciate some prime alliteration there. I'd give you a gold star, Mary, but I think it would catch fire where you are. Anyway, on top of the excessive violence, she had a problem with the satanic villains of the Swords of Wayland episode. Why was she opposed to satanic bad guys? I'm guessing she was a Satanist then. She'll do alright in hell. Carpenter debated her publicly, and from the sounds of it, he wiped the floor with her.
I said, well, Mary, you see, I find it very difficult to express myself because I'm a professional writer. professional what? And she said, I'm not a professional anything. And I said, good.
Anyway, in spite of all of this, the violence is almost entirely bloodless, adhering to the strict broadcast regulation, and the outlaws usually make a point of only killing in self-defense. It's pretty comical now to imagine so much uproar over a show as tame as this, when the kids section of Primark is now full of merch for a show where a bunch of teenage boys get their balls bitten off by piranhas. In the trailer. One of the things I've seen people bring up the most about this show is the soundtrack by Clannad, an Irish folk band that had just started experimenting with synth. It's absolutely gorgeous, particularly Together We and Strangeland. I was listening to this music constantly whilst writing this review. I don't know what it is about Robin Hood adaptations inspiring the most terrific soundtracks. The original soundtrack album, Legend, was Clannad's first album entirely in English, and won the BAFTA Award for Best Original Television Music, making them the first Irish band to do so. I don't think I've ever heard of a TV show where the score is remembered this fondly. It's the only show I know of where the Blu-ray release allows you to play it with an audio-only track. It's so iconic that the band's last ever show was a performance of this soundtrack album, Legend, in its entirety at the Albert Hall last year. However, the use of synth does date it, so it does take a bit of getting used to with modern ears. It's a testament to the beauty of their soundtrack that the synth is relatively easy to move past. It's not used as prominently as the traditional instruments like flute, harp, and mandolin. The use of sound aside from the music is very atmospheric too. The effects have also aged, particularly in Series 3, but they're few and far between, and I think they did a good job for what I assume was available to them at the time. For the most part, they keep it simple, and it works well, like the magical battle with the Baron in Episode 2. This was a pretty big budget show at the time from what I understand. I've seen people call it Prestige TV before Prestige TV was a thing. Another thing that has aged is the noticeable day for night filming, which I can't believe ever looked convincing. There's also these washes of colour, which I guess are kind of dated, but they're not used too often, and I think they work well to help set the tone. Whilst I confess that I don't know enough about cinematography, it's brilliant here, particularly the use of POV shots. There's a great moment in Series 3 where Little John and Will are fighting in a burning village, and then it keeps switching to a battle where Robin and the others are fighting against mystical guards in slow motion. Whilst it does fit the aesthetic of a lot of 80s fantasy, I've seen people say a couple of times that the series was heavily influenced by the 1981 movie Excalibur, with its mix of an ethereal and gritty approach to medieval fantasy. I haven't seen anything written down that actually confirms that, but from what I've seen in the trailer, I wouldn't be surprised. What they definitely share, however, is Robert Addy, as he'd played Mordred in that film. Do let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me review it in the future. The series was massively influential, particularly on the 1991 film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. There's plenty of related things, from the paganism to having an angsty and distrustful Will Scarlet. However, probably the most notable sign of its influence is in the character of Azim. You see, the screenwriters were just writing Nazir into the script, assuming he was a character from the original Legend, only to find out that he was exclusive to this show and had to change the name and details of their own Arab character. This simple mistake started off a modern tradition in Robin Hood adaptations of having an original character from the Middle East as part of Robin's gang, demonstrating that legends continue to be something we add to and change over time. The same way that many in my comment section couldn't help but compare the BBC Robin Hood series to the one that they'd grown up with, I couldn't help but compare Robin of Sherwood to the series I'd grown up with. However, Robin of Sherwood tries something very different in genre and tone, so it's difficult to compare in terms of which is better, and I don't really want to do that here. Whilst both balance fatal stakes with fun, Robin of Sherwood has a more ethereal tone than an adventurous one, as well as a comparatively slower pace, which I guess would have been the norm at the time. I mean, listen to the theme tunes. They're definitely aiming for something different. Both have plenty of action, but it's much easier for me to define the 2006 series as an action-adventure show, whilst the 80s series is far more of a swords and sorcery show. I was initially going to compare how they dealt with the deaths of major characters, but even then, the goals and circumstances of them make them too difficult to compare fairly. I feel like everything else is a matter of personal preference in terms of which is better. Every time something like this gets adapted again, people ask why they should bother when this or that version already did it so well. When they were making this, people were constantly comparing it to the Richard Green version from the 1950s. Comparison is inevitable, but it can also be the thief of joy. It's better to appreciate each version as its own thing.
So, this guy's dead?
Michael Praed left at the end of Series 2 so that he could do The Three Musketeers on Broadway. Whilst his career never reached the same heights, despite a stint in Dynasty, it's clear that he doesn't regret it, and we can't judge his actions in the past with our hindsight. So, much like the original legend, which is multiple conflicting origin stories, they came up with a second Robin Hood, Earl's son Robert of Huntingdon, to take up the mantle of the Hooded Man. I'm pretty sure that Robin Hood became a medieval alias for multiple thieves anyway. The beginning of Series 3 does a good job of establishing Robert of Huntingdon as Robert of Locksley's successor, where he is chosen by Herne, assembles his men, beats Little John in a quarterstaff fight, has a sword fight with Nazir, and saves Marion from pagans. Although the plot that takes place around those beats is different enough that you may not have even noticed it, it checks off the list of actions that made Robin of Locksley earn our respect. Whilst I do think that his performance does leave something to be desired, Jason Connery is okay in the leading role. Although producer Paul Knight has been frank about the fact that Jason's famous lineage as the son of original Bond and former Robin Hood Sean Connery was an appealing factor in his casting, it was clear that he and Esther Charkham genuinely liked Connery for the leading role, purposefully going for someone who didn't look like Michael Praed. The American promotional material was pretty shameless though. I've never seen a so-called Nepo baby's father get mentioned in a trailer before.
We'll meet the young actor who's not only attempting to fill the hood of one of Showtime's heroes, but the shoes of his famous 007 father.
I think that, much like Timothy Dalton, he just needed a bit more time for the audience to accept him in the character. And, much like George Lazenby, he probably would have improved as an actor in that time too. As for his romance with Marion, it's alright, but I think they should have made more out of the whole will they won't they of their relationship. Some of the episodes, particularly the Horowitz ones, seem like they may have been originally written with Robin of Locksley in mind, so the build-up of their relationship only runs through about half of the episodes, which may not have even been shown in order. The episode order of Series 2 differs between Wikipedia and ITVX, which is something I haven't seen before. I'd say that Series 3 is definitely as good as the previous two on the whole. I think having a new lead and the fact that it was cancelled soon afterwards led people to think that the show fell off in quality, but thanks to Carpenter and Horowitz, the show was as great as it ever was. Like many shows, it looks like it was cancelled purely because the network's leadership had changed. So, has the series stood the test of time? Whilst there are noticeably 80s elements, it's still a very engaging show with great characters and an unmatched atmosphere. Although it's rather different tonally, I would recommend it to people who are fans of other adaptations of the legend. I definitely recommend it to you if you're a fan of folklore and fantasy, particularly from the 80s. Have you ever been to Glastonbury? The town, not the festival. Yeah, that's the vibe. I wouldn't be surprised if Legend was playing on rotation in their tarot card shops. If you want to check it out for yourselves, then it's available in full on ITVX in the UK, and the extended soundtrack album is available on music streaming services. If you want a copy for yourself, then I've read online that you could save a lot of money by buying the German edition of the Blu-ray. After the series was cancelled, Carpenter repeatedly tried to bring it back, rewriting his Series 4 ideas into a screenplay called Knights of the Apocalypse. In 2016, 4 years after his death, Spiteful Puppet crowdfunded an audio drama adaptation of the screenplay, with the surviving cast returning. I tried to find it so that I could review that too, but I can't seem to find it for sale anywhere. The company has continued to make Robin Hood audio dramas, which appear to be available for free with Audible, but I can't find this one anywhere, either to stream it or buy a physical copy, and I know that the latter was released at the time. I could only find the novelisation. Speaking of which, Whilst there were, of course, novelisations, annuals and comic strips released at the time, there's also a current series of official Robin of Sherwood novels from indie publishing houses Oak Tree Books and Chinbeard Books, most of which are novelisations of the audio dramas, with about 4 writers releasing books every few months over the past few years. I'm tempted to review them for members, so let me know if you'd like to see that. However, they do appear to have used generative AI for at least one of their covers, and if you use generative AI in one aspect of your work, I'm inherently distrustful of the rest of it. As for other tie-in media, there was a successful spin-off game called The Touchstones of Rhiannon on the ZX Spectrum that was released in 1985, adapting the first series. There's an emulator on Internet Archive, but it's one of those text-based adventure games and I never know how to play those. However, I'm going to try and play it on a live stream on Sunday, so you can join me then if you want to help me or just watch me fail. And of course, I want to hear which screen version of Robin Hood you'd like to see me review next. I read all of my comments and reply to as many of them as I can. If you want to find out why the director of Robin Hood Prince of Thieves walked from the film, then you can watch my video essay on the extended cut right here. See you soon!